The title of my message today is When Vision Feels Far Away. When vision feels far away. Who's ever had a vision before that excited you and began to move you forward? And about 3 weeks into it, you were feeling like that's far away. It's far away. When I was in college, I was so stupid. Like when I was in college, I had this great idea that I was going to run a marathon because I had my buddy who was like really in shape and he was in track and he was trying to get me to do this thing, and I just was like, yeah, no, let's do it. And I remember I paid registration and we were going to do this thing. We were going to run this marathon, and he was like, Usain Bolt over there, and I was not. But in my mind, I was still a wrestler in high school. Who's ever been there before? Like I still had it, right? I still had it, and I did not have it. This is like a junior. That part of my life had ended. I started a new phase of my life. You always know things change when you're known as athletic and then you're known as intellectual. Like, that's not a good sign if you were an athlete. That's what happened to me. And I remember that we signed up for this thing, and I was living on vision. I was so excited. Like, I had made this commitment, and we were going to run this marathon. I was telling everybody, which was also kind of dumb. And so my buddy was like, hey, we got to sign up for this fun run, because if we're going to do this big long race, it was called the fun run. It was a 3-mile race, and because we got to train for it. And said, okay, so we put that 30 days out. I remember it was called the Fun Run, and the whole school would do it. It was this big thing. It was like kind of a general physical education thing, and they would ask the whole school to do it. And so I said, okay, this is great. And I remember signing up. And I remember about 30 days out after we signed up, we were going to do the small race in preparation for the big one. And my buddy was like, hey, I know that you haven't run very much, but in a while, so I recommend you put some sessions in before the fun run, because even though it's 3 miles, that's still a long way if you haven't done it in a while. And I just remember looking at him like, bro, you don't know me, son. Like, there's no way I need to be prepared. I was a wrestler. I did track in high school. Sure, I've put on 10, 15 pounds, but I'm good. It's only 3 miles. Like, come on. And so I remember we did this fun run, and he was like, okay, buddy, like, okay. And I remember we did the run, and the first, 200 meters, I was flying. I remember it was literally, the run was around our school. And so the first part of it was downhill. And so, man, you should have saw me. I was clocking 7-minute miles. Like, I was racing. And then we got to, the bottom of this parking lot, and you had to go around. And then we started going uphill. And I remember I was going up that hill, and things were not looking good, I'll be honest. And I started to wheeze, and I got that pain in your side, and then just terror filled my body. And I realized that I was not the man I thought I was. And I remember it was so humiliating. I remember I had to go from a run to a walk, and as I was walking up this hill, this other girl that was in one of my classes who actually did train just passed me with all her friends, and I literally walked the line. And I remember the next day, after finishing that race, I was so sore I skipped all my classes and I slept in. And it took me 3 days to recover with shin splints. And I couldn't even face my buddy. I texted him and I said, I don't think that the marathon is a good idea. I think that the Lord is speaking to me, and he's telling me that I need to really focus on my priorities and my grades and the things of God, not these silly things. True story. I never forget this. And so, it's interesting. I wrote a book last year called Your Breakthrough Year. And in the research of that book, I found out something interesting, that when people make New Year's resolutions, millions of Americans all over the country make New Year's resolutions. By February 1st, 78% of people give up on their visions. It's interesting. There's this famous study where you could look at like week 1, it's like 4% give up. You're like, okay, those people weren't even committed anyway. Week 2 goes up to 28%. Week 3 goes up to 54%. Week 4 goes up to 78%. And as I did more research on why people fail, why people kind of give up on their visions and dreams, and what I realized was that I think most people have the desire. Most people have the vision. I believe every person in this room has been given a vision. Maybe it's a vision for your business. This is going to be the year that you're going to grow your business. Maybe it's a vision for your household. There's been something so beautiful that's been happening in this church. People have had a spiritual renewal. It's like this week. It's like the 7th person told me. I don't know why, but I just feel spiritually renewed. I feel refreshed. A lot of people are having spiritual visions. This is the year I want to get closer to God. My mom just preached on this. This is the year I want to hear his voice. This is the year I want to get off the sidelines. I want to get in on the game. This is the year I want to say yes to God's calling on my life to have a ministry. Even if it's not full-time ministry, but there's a part of me that is saying yes to something. We all have, I believe most people have the vision and they have the desire. But I think what they are misinformed out in is the process of how we get there. You know, I really believe this. I don't think people climb mountains because they're mountain climbers. I believe that when people say yes to climbing the mountain, they become the climber. I talk to a lot of young people and a lot of young folks that do well, actually. 30, 35, they're doing really cool things. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% young people who are like really doing cool stuff. I meet a lot of them. And you'd be surprised how many of them say, I feel like I don't belong. Or I feel like I'm an imposter. Or I feel like this is too good to be true. I feel like it's going to end. Or I don't feel qualified to be in the room. I'm the youngest person in the room. This is a common thing I hear a lot. And I think it's interesting because I'll remind them, because sometimes I get to put my pastor hat on. I say, you know, it's okay not to feel like you belong in the room because you've never been in the room before. This is the first time in the room. Of course you don't feel like you're the best girlfriend or husband or wife. You've never been one before. Of course you don't feel like you're the best manager at your job. You're only 6 months into the managing role. Of course you don't feel like you're adequate going from JV to varsity. Well, this is your first time playing varsity. And so I think this is a real powerful thing if you can get this in your spirit. And this is point number 1 for those of you taking notes. Transformation happens when we say yes to the journey. I want to read this, Luke 9:23. I feel like I'm speaking to someone in this room today. Then he said to them all, whoever wants to be my disciple, this is Jesus, must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. The idea here, as I write in my notes, discipleship isn't just about believing in Jesus. It's about following him. I think it's interesting that we do not refer to Christians as people who simply believe in Jesus. Scripture says this, even the demons believe. Even the forces of darkness know Jesus rose from the dead. So there's no value in being opinionated about a guy who lived 2,000 years ago and says, yeah, that probably happened. I could see that happening. I think there's something more. But the term Christian doesn't mean Christ believer, someone who believes in a set of statements and walks away. It's people who follow Jesus, a Christ follower. That's an interesting idea. It's interesting that even Jesus says, follow me. He doesn't say, believe in me. He says, follow me. Our faith, we're called to be followers of Jesus. Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. Someone say, follow me. 2 Corinthians 3:18 says, and we all who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory are being transformed into his image with ever increasing glory, which comes from the Lord, who is the Spirit. I believe that who we follow, we become. The process of discipleship transforms us into Christ's likeness as we remain faithful to him. In other words, transformation is found in the journey. It's found in the journey. I think so often when we have a vision for something, like I'm going to be successful in business, or I'm going to be successful in my family, or my family's going to be transformed, we have a picture of that future reality that we believe in for and striving for. But I think what we forget is that we're not striving for a picture. We desire to live within a frame. Is that there's something, almost everything that we want in life is not just a goal to hit. It's about having something which allows us to do something. Like, for instance, we don't want to build a business and walk away. We want to be in business. We want to work with great people. We want to produce great things. No one wants to develop a great marriage and then quit the day it works. Could you imagine? It's like, okay, guys, 9 years, we finally realized how to communicate. We did therapy. We went on all the cruises. We're good. We put all our friends to shame. Romance is so palpable. We walk into CVS and people know we're together. Come on, somebody. Everywhere we go, we exude. Are you guys newly married? No, going on 12 years. Thank you very much. You don't meet people who put all that work in and then they go, well, we're done. We achieved it. I think I'm good. I think I'm going to go work on a second marriage and try to re-achieve it again. I think I'm going to do like a three-peat. I want to be like the Kobe Bryant of marriages. I want to keep winning. Like, no one does that. No one does that. Transformation, what we desire is the journey. Point number 2, I think this will change a lot of people's lives. And I want to just impart this to you. Faith is found in God before a harvest. Faith is always found before. My dad would tell me all the time, faith is he loved that scripture in the Bible of faith is the evidence of things unseen, right? It's the things that we haven't seen that we believe. And I like Galatians 6:9 that says, let us not become weary in doing good. For at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Faith is built in the in-between seasons. I think that the reason why God allows us to go through deserts, there's a technical reason. And this is like classic Stefan Junaeus. Like, what's the technical reason of why, what's the utility of a desert? A desert allows for development. Well, why is that meaningful? Because God has work for us to do. And he often needs someone who's capable of doing the work in order to do it. And so he puts us in situations as his people so we can develop into the kind of people who can say yes to the work he wants to do. So it's like, this is hard. Well, good. You're going to need a season to get used to it being a little hard, because you're going to need to know this skill. So God looks at a family and says, I desire to break 3 generations of alcoholism. I believe this is how God works. He looks at a family, and he sent his son to heal that family and renew that family and to restore that family and to teach the ways of God to that family and to make that family citizens of heaven, so everywhere they go in the world, they bring heaven with them. I think when God looks at your family, that's what he wants. He wants your family to be a wellspring, that every generation produces more and more goodness. And so that's his desire. And he sends Jesus to defeat sin and death itself. And he provided the Spirit. So now all he's looking for is a person to say yes in the family. And so that's what happened. He'll come to us as people and he'll give us a vision. That's what I believe he did with this church. He gave the leadership of this church a vision. I believe that God has a plan to see thousands and thousands of families in this city get transformed by him over the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. And so what God does is he calls a people. He calls a people. And then he begins to equip us, but also ask us to say yes to him and say yes to the journey. You can look through all Scripture. It's the same. It's Abraham living on his father's land. God calls him to leave his father's home. You can go through Paul, same thing. Meets Jesus on the road, calls him. Paul goes to him for 10 years in preparation before the disciples ask him to be the person to bring his message, the message of the good news to the Gentile world, the non-Jewish world. Joseph in the Bible. I mean, you can go down the list. The first thing God does is he imparts vision, and then he asks us to say yes to the journey. And so I think so often what we feel like we want to happen is it's like we want to see the harvest now. Who doesn't want to see the harvest now? Like, hey, God, I love this. You're telling me I'm called. The harvest is plentiful. What is it? There's few, but the harvest is plentiful. And it's like, that's me, God. I hear you. I'm on church right now. I say yes. There's few of me. Of course there's few of me because I'm pretty great. And the harvest is plentiful. And so you go out and it's like God gives you a land and he asks you to start planting seeds and you're planting those seeds. And then I think we kind of expect that it's like we saw the YouTube video. It's like plant, seed, harvest. Like, right? We planted them. We watered them, and then what happens? There's like a hurricane, and then there's like a drought, right? And then your sister's upset, and then something happens, someone leaves you, and then this thing happens, and then the neighbor dies, and then the dog dies, and you're there for like 3 years, and you're like, I haven't really seen a harvest yet. Am I in the right field? Is you sure this is where I was supposed to be? Someone recheck that map. Like, God, are you sure I'm supposed to be here? It's in the in-between where we discover faith, where we discover who he is, where we discover what he has truly said, where we discover what we're made of, what he put into us. You know, there's been seasons in my life I felt like God gave me a word this year that he could not have given me last year. I mean, he could have gave it to me. I would have heard it. I couldn't have acted on it. I could have heard it. But I needed last year to get to a place where I could hear it and go, I'm in this year. Because God is like a parent. We've all had kids. I haven't had them, but I've hung out with them. I've seen them. I've seen them in public, typically with help. My wife makes, I apologize to anyone under the age of 18. If I ever seem socially awkward, it's because I'm slightly terrified. I don't want to mess them up. Is that weird to say? If it's 90, if I have to be, even when my cousins, they came and they dropped out all their kids. They had 94 kids, good for them. And they were all there between 3 and 10. And we were supposed to babysit. Ooh, that was tough. I could not imagine a worse. Dude, I'm not born. I don't know how people babysit. I am terrible. I lasted 7 minutes. 7 minutes. I called my mom. I go, you got to get me out of it. What do I got to do? I'll trade anything. I can't. They want to wrestle. I can't do this. They're running in 9 different directions. I just can't do it. I'm melting. I need to book a therapy session. I just can't. How is this going to happen? It's not good. Point number 3, purpose is discovered in sacrifice. Romans 8:28 says this, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. What I want to focus in this verse, because we read this verse often, purpose isn't found in the comfort. It's often revealed through the sacrifice. That's good. Write it down. Purpose is discovered in sacrifice. It's only through sacrifice. I think I see this a lot. This is where people miss it. Because they're uncomfortable, and what they're doing is going to ask them to give something. And it's unclear what they're going to get in return, and they think they have an option. And they realize what they don't know is that you don't have a choice. You just get to pick your sacrifice. You don't get to not sacrifice. You just get to pick your sacrifice. Does that make sense? This is true. It is because you have to give something to become something. You have to. It's always a trade. It's I want to be a great leader. I want to be successful. Great goal. It's going to require a lot of giving. Because to be a successful person can take a desert and produce water. And so you're going to have to get really used to being in a desert to be that. Or I hear this all the time, I want to be a great leader. That's fantastic. Get ready to sacrifice all affirmation ever. Because the amount you put in and the recognition you get is not equal at all. Like every manager, you're managing people. The amount you're putting in with all the folks you're managing, and the amount of times they tell you, hey, just thank you for being you. Exactly. Thank you for being you. How often? But if you're willing to sacrifice, what you'll find is that you will find purpose. You'll find something to sacrifice for that's worthy, that's worth enough. You'll commit yourself to a vision, a purpose. You'll serve something bigger. You'll make a bigger impact, and it'll be worth it. That's the trade. And I think that's what Romans 8:28 says. And we know that all things God's work for good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. My translation is, when you say yes to God, and you courageously strive towards the person he's calling you to be, if you have the courage to do that, if you have the courage to strive towards being the person in your family that's going to be the gateway of change, for those who strive according to his purpose, God works for the good of those who love him. It's not quite a contract, that's the wrong word, but it's a call. You know, we call God the Father. The primary role of a father, archetypically, because I'm a writer, and so if you ever write a story, you have a father figure, there's an archetype of what a great father does. Great fathers encourage courage. They encourage us to be courageous in the face of fear, challenge, and sacrifice. They tell us that we can do it, that we do have it in us. That archetype is reflected in God the Father. And so almost in every story in the Old Testament, when God reveals himself, God the Father reveals himself to anyone, Moses, Noah, Abraham, he calls them to be courageous in the midst of what they don't know. He tells them, I hear you, buddy. You're not a mountain climber. And I'm calling you to climb this mountain. But I'll promise you this. If you say yes to climbing the mountain, you will discover that you are that person through me, through my presence, through my spirit. Moses, if you say yes to going back to Egypt, even though you have a stutter, you will find a voice inside of you that can speak to an ocean and part it. Paul, you might feel unworthy. You killed Christians. You actively fought to dismantle my church. But if you say yes to me and cross that ocean to Greece, you will find all that you need, and people will come out of the woodwork in every city you go to house you, to clothe you, and to provide the means to build his church. See, there's something so amazing. This is my final point. God reveals himself when you seek him. Jeremiah 29:13 says, you will seek me and find me. If the worship team wants to come up. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. And I write, God's presence becomes most real when we actively seek him. Especially when we step into places where we need him to sustain us. That's the sustaining. When we choose to put ourselves in uncomfortable situations where we are stretched, when we have to learn, when we have to reorganize, and we have to open ourselves up to God, that is when we hear his voice the strongest. I want to encourage every person in this room today. If you feel weary, if the vision feels far away, if you feel like you don't know how you're going to do it, maybe it was lofty, if you feel inadequate, if you feel like you don't have it all together, I'm going to tell you now, that's okay. It's a divine gift that God has given you in this season to discover more, to discover his voice. It's a cool thing. I will tell you personally, in my life, I have learned more about God when I didn't know what I was doing, or when I felt overwhelmed. Because in my overwhelmedness, his clarity prevails. In my weakness, His goodness was my strength. That's the beauty of God. This year, I want to teach you a hack, if you will, something that I do. I do it every day. It's really cool. Pray when you feel tired or whatever you're dealing with. Thank God in advance for what He's going to give you. Just do it for like a few minutes. But if there's ever like a moment, maybe you're not feeling well or you're dealing with something, just try it. Try it in the next week. It's really cool. It really centers you, and it's really biblical. My wife sometimes hears me do this because she'll walk out. She heard me this week. And I'll be in the kitchen and I'll be out of nowhere. I'll just say, Father, thank you in advance for your blessings. Thank you in advance for your goodness. Thank you in advance for the strength that you've given me, for the vision you've given me. Thank you in advance for the people that you have put in my path that I can be a light to. Thank you in advance for those that you've put in my corner, people that I haven't even met with, mentors that I'll meet next year and the following year. Thank you, God, that you have put them in my way. Thank you that there are people praying for me that I don't know what their names are. Thank you that you have given me all that I have and all that I will ever need in advance, Lord. In advance. I just thank you in advance. Because even though I don't have it now and I don't know how it's all going to work, I don't need to know. I just need to know that all things work for those who earnestly seek Him and work for His purpose. And God, I can do that. I can work for His purpose. I can seek the kingdom. I can take care of what you've told me to do. And I believe that you have my back today, tomorrow, and forever. I'm done preaching. Let's give the Lord a clap. Oh man, 11:28. Let's do this real quick. If everybody could just stand. I just want to pray and then who has 3 minutes? I know it's 11:29. We're going to go over. I'm sorry. Push your plans back. Just be 3 minutes, I promise. But yeah, I just want to pray over us. I love this verse. Someone asked me the other day, like, why we do a prayer at the end of every service, and why we do it. And I said, there's an incredible power in saying yes to God daily. It's powerful to say daily. 2 Corinthians says this, right? And we all, with unveiled faces, contemplate the Lord's glory, are being transformed into His image, ever-increasing glory. The process of transformation from Jesus is us showing up. It's going to church. It's giving regularly. It's using our gifts and talents to serve the body and people outside the church. You do that, you will grow. It's that simple. It's like that verse today when we talked about giving, and it says you will be given a measure of what you've given. I don't think that's a law where God like holds that over us, where it's like if you don't give, I'm not going to give. I think it's just it's just a description of reality. I think it's just how that works. I think, as I said before, I think there are words that God, I believe, had for me this year that He gave me. He couldn't tell me last year. I think I could have heard it, but I just wasn't ready to say yes. I think that there's going to be things God will tell me, and God will tell you in 5 years from now, that the next 5 years are going to build a foundation so you can not only hear it, but you could do something about what you hear. And that starts just by saying yes to God every day. And you do that, and you thank Him, and He will start to fill you, and it will start small, but it will grow. And then pretty soon, you'll be calling and texting me with words that God has given you. And I will read them and go, man, that is powerful. Because that person hears from God. How beautiful is that? Just pray with me this prayer. I'd like to invite anyone who, if you're a person that is here today and you're saying, hey, Pastor Stefan, I just want more of this. I'm a Christian, but maybe I haven't, maybe I'm not living the way I want to live, or maybe this isn't my priority, and that's a problem. And today I want to just say yes to God along with everybody else, so I can recenter myself. For those who are watching online too, just to pray this with me. Dear Jesus, thank you for giving me life. Thank you for coming to earth and dying for my sins to change my life. Jesus, be Jesus in my life in a new and special way. Today, I say yes to being transformed through you. Amen.